warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We've got another conference preview podcast for you. This is going to be the CAA Conference Preview Edition. This is always a fun one. I feel like this has been one of the better mid-majors out there in all of college basketball. Here in the first segment, I'm going to give you guys a lay of the land in terms of the betting trends and the styles of play in this conference. Jacob Phillips, he does great work over at Mid-Major Madness. He is going to join me in segment number 2, and we're going to look at all 13 of these rosters with him. He is a Northeastern alum, so he's able to give us some great insight there. In the final segment, I'm going to get you guys my projector or finish for this fine conference. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And as per usual, I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. That allows me to know what you all want me to be talking about here on this podcast, and it really gives me a good understanding of what you want me to focus on to be able to get you set for what is going to be the greatest college basketball season ever, and it makes the offseason go by a little bit faster. I do not answer those questions on these specialized conference preview editions because whether you're listening in super late June, July, August, September, doesn't matter. I want these to be relatively evergreen, and that way you get good insight to be able to get you prepared for what I hope it to be the best college basketball season ever. But let's get down to business and let's take a look at a Coastal Conference that what stands out to me is that you had a lack of three-point shooting in this conference last year. Like UNC Wilmington was the team that really ran things during the regular season. They were an okay three-point shooting team. They were 124th. They shot 35% from three-point range. Towson was a team that really controlled this conference 2 seasons ago. They just toilet bowled. They shot 27.4% from three-point range at home, bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. Overall, home and road, 349th in all of college basketball with their three-point shooting. Drexel was the team that was outside the top 275 in terms of points per possession, and ironically enough, they were one of the best three-point shooting teams in the conference. They shot 35.5%. That was 90th in all of college basketball, but certainly some issues there. Monmouth was about 156th in the country, but Charleston, a team that did a lot of things well, they were 331st. They only shot about 30.6% from three-point range. Hampton, 357th in the country. They were shooting 28.8% from three-point range. North Carolina A&T was a team that very much had their struggles as well. 305th. They shot 31.6% from three-point range. Northeastern was just a team that was all over the place. Their offense wasn't too bad, 187th in terms of a three-point shooting percentage on offense. On defense, just an absolute train wreck there. Campbell, they are now going to be without John Andrewchuk. New regime there, 267th with regards to their three-point shooting. And then we had the Pride of Hofstra. They were really the main team that was able to light it up from three, and that's why they represented the conference in the NCAA tournament, 25th in the country with a 37.1% three-point shooting percentage, and a lot of the teams in this conference like to play a little bit more slowly. Hofstra last year, en route to the NCAA tournament, 304th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Towson always loves to play low and slow, 358th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Drexel's always a team that loves to play slow as well, 334th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Those are really your creme de la creme teams in terms of playing slow, but even a team like a UNC Wilmington, 309th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you do have a few teams that were looking to crank it up a little bit more. Charleston, when they were under the tutelage of Chris Mack, they were 169th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and even though the Mack attack is out, they are now going to be under the tutelage of John Gross, who was over at Akron. That team was 77th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so they're still going to look to gun it. Elon was a mid-tempo team, 178th or so in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and under Andrewchuk for Campbell, they were about 126th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but a lot of your better teams, they were teams that were looking to slow things down a little bit more. Stony Brook, they were about 237th in the country in terms of total possessions per game as well. Now you've got a team in William & Mary that just loves to gun it. They are the team that is really the outlier in this conference, 17th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got Coach Earl doing a great job there, so that'll be interesting. And then for North Carolina A&T, they're sort of a go with a flow team, 142nd in terms of total possessions per game. And then Hampton, another slow team, 265th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And what you're going to notice in this conference as well is that rebounding is so paramount and it is so key with UNC Wilmington. They have been that top rebounding team in this conference. They were 26th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, top 30 team with regards to overall rebound percentage, and second and third chances are just so key in this conference because either you get them or you don't. Hampton, they were about 160th with regards to percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Charleston, they had some issues because they were about 204th in the country with regards to offensive rebound percentage. Elon took some nice strides forward because they were 90th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Monmouth was okay, 144th in the country with that regard, and one thing North Carolina A&T did, they were able to grab some boards. 145th in the country with this regard. They were pretty good on the defensive boards as well. And then a team like Towson, they were an awful shooting team, but they were 18th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. And then you got a team like Hofstra. They were so good with their offense, 41st in terms of offensive rebound percentage. And this is a conference in which it's going to be very hard to be able to get 2-point shot looks. Hofstra, who represented in the NCAA tournament last year for the second straight year, top 5 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They just suck the life out of you. They drive things to the outside. They do such a great job in terms of making sure that you're not going to get some easy looks. And then for UNC Wilmington, who has been really atop the conference the last few seasons, they were 87th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So a little bit of a fall off there, but still solid. Charleston, they were 79th in the country with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage last season. A team like an Elon that, they really ascended with their offense. Big thing was on defense. They were 248th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Monmouth was another team I saw with their interior defense, 81st in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Towson was 96th as well. So a lot of these teams, they do a nice job in terms of guarding down low, and that's why 3-point shooting has become so key with regards to this conference. And then you got a team like William & Mary that was a top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They had to make up for the fact that they were 266th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And then when it comes to the betting trends, because you do have a relatively spread out conference here in the Coastal Conference, and it's going to get even more spread out when they've got Fairfield in the fold next season. But that said, it does span pretty much all across the northeast part of the country, which, ironically enough, with regards to the Coastal Conference, you had a few teams that were just studs last year. Elon was 11-19 against the spread. They had a few really nice results to begin the season, then they just flailed late in the season with their lack of defense. Northeastern, 11-20 against the spread. They have just fallen on tough times, but you only had 3 of the 13 teams hit below 53% against the spread in the conference. Towson, 14-17-1 against the spread. They were a disappointment, but Hofstra, 21-12 against the spread. Charleston, 19-12 against the spread. Drexel, 18-13-1 against the spread. North Carolina A&T, 16-12 against the spread. Stony Brook, 17-13, 18-14 for Campbell, 16-13 for Hampton, 16-14 with 16-14 and 2 pushes as well for both UNC Wilmington and William & Mary. And then Monmouth, 17-15-1 against the spread, as these were teams that really stepped up in the non-con, because a lot of these mid-major teams, they get overlooked. Only 3 teams were below 50% with regards to their against the spread record in non-conference play. Campbell was 5-6 in non-con play. Monmouth, Drexel, they both went 5-7. You had William & Mary go 9-1 against the spread in non-conference play. Hofstra 10-2 against the spread. So if you're looking for a mid-major conference that early on during the season typically gets a little bit overlooked, undervalued, the Coastal Conference over the last few years has been really good in these non-conference games. Stony Brook was 8-3 against the spread. Northeastern, they were 7-4 against the spread. So these teams did a really nice job there, as these are teams that are very much equipped to being able to cover a lot of games on the road, I noticed, because you only had 4 teams within the conference hit less than 50% against the spread away from home. William & Mary was 7-8 against the spread away from home. Drexel 6-7-1. Northeastern 7-9. Towson, again, disappointing year, 4-8-1 against the spread away from home. But for UNC Wilmington, 8-5-1 against the spread away from home. As a matter of fact, you had 5 different teams at least 60% against the spread away from home. Charleston was 9-3. Hofstra was 11-6. North Carolina A&T, Monmouth were both 9-6, and then Campbell, not to be overlooked, 9-7 against the spread away from home. As a lot of these underdogs were very, very plucky, and they were providing a lot of value for you. You take a look at this conference, only 1 team covered less than 50% of their games against the spread as an underdog. Northeastern, 8-15 against the spread as an underdog, but Hofstra was 7-3. William & Mary, America's favorite tag team, 5-3 against the spread as an underdog. Elon, 10-7. Hampton, 11-8. Stony Brook, 12-9. North Carolina A&T, 13-10. So points were your friend in this conference. And then you take a look at the overall totals, because you do have quite a few slower teams in this conference. You've got a black sheep in William & Mary with regards to the totals, and you saw a relatively good split. You had 1 demonstrative team to the under in Towson, as per usual, 11 overs to 21 unders. 1 demonstrative team to the over, Northeastern, because they weren't playing a lot of defense outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 20 overs to 11 unders, and then a nice middle where North Carolina T was like 16-12 to the over with 16 overs to 12 unders. Your next best under team was Charleston with regards to them as opposed to Towson, 13 overs to 18 unders. And then a bunch of teams that were somewhere between about 55% to the under to 55% to the over. So nothing that was like overly demonstrative and was just overly jarring there. And you take a look at the dynamic of conference play within the Coastal Conference, things really slowed down. Northeastern and North Carolina A&T were two big outliers. 14 overs to 6 unders for Northeastern in conference play, and then North Carolina A&T 13 overs to 6 unders in conference play. You can see Wilmington did play 11 overs to 8 unders in conference play, but a lot of these other teams, they were one game above the over mark, like Stony Brook 10 overs to 9 unders, Campbell and Hofstra 11 overs to 10 unders, but then you had some big under teams. Drexel, Towson, these teams that play slow, they were really banking for you for the under. For Drexel, 14 unders to 6 overs. Towson, 14 unders to 7 overs. Charleston, because they couldn't shoot it from 3, they were 12 unders to 7 overs. Elon, 11 unders to 8 overs. William & Mary, 11 unders to 9 overs after you saw these just teams get a little bit overvalued with regards to the overs. So it's a very interesting conference. It's a fun conference that has really been able to make you some money in non-conference play, and those underdogs, they were a cash-in, and we're looking to cash in big up next as we're going to be chatting it up with Jacob Phillips. He does great work over at Mid-Major Madness. We're going to take a look at all 13 of these teams out here in the Coastal Conference right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast, the Coastal Conference Preview Edition. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is a Coastal Conference Preview Edition, so it's great to get this man aboard. Jacob Phillips, he's doing a tremendous job over at Mid-Major Madness, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He does a lot of CAA conference information for them. He also just covers the Northeast in general with regards to college basketball landscape. I know that he's doing a great job taking a look at a little bit of everything, and additionally, I know that he's got some ties to this conference because he used to go to Northeastern. So great to be able to get Jacob aboard. He's coming to us from overseas right now, so give him a lot of credit where it is due. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter /X at his first name, Jacob, PHI all together. And Jacob, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Glad I can make it.
Glad I could have you aboard. And Jacob, how about if we start off with a team that's near and dear to you for Northeastern? Because a decade ago, this was a team that was really making a lot of NCAA tournaments. I feel like for Coach Cohen, maybe the game has passed them by a little bit. It's been a few rough seasons for them. How do you take a look at this team? Because they're going to be bringing back Mike, and I always get this last name correct, Lognane, but past that, a lot of transfers from a team that really needed to pick it up on defense.
Yeah, Mike Lognane is the guy. You could say the game's past Cohen, but I don't know if that's entirely fair. It's a different game. Coach Cohen, for the last 20 years, has been all about signing freshmen, developing them over 4 years, and at the mid-major level, it's not really an option anymore. Obviously, we saw what that looked like last season for Northeastern. Bottom 2 finish in the CAA, got past A&T in the first round of the conference tournament, but couldn't really get much further than that. They lost even more talent. A lot of the freshmen that got them that far last year are gone. L.A. Pratt, who was supposed to be their star last year, got injured really quick, is gone. There are a couple promising freshmen they brought in, a couple redshirt guys like Dorian Grosberg from High Point that have some promise as far as the transfer goes, and their roster isn't quite done yet. So we don't know what they're going to look like when it's all said and done, but only 4 returners coming back from a team that already really struggled last season to begin with, and no real high-profile transfers coming in just yet. I'm excited about Lewis Bond coming over from Idaho State. If there's going to be a star on this team, you feel like it might be him. if it's not going to be one of the guys that's already on the roster or was already on the roster last year. Really steady point guard with some pretty solid defensive acumen who fits in really nicely next to Lockname, but a lot of talent out the door, and they didn't have that much to begin with. Could be another bottom 3 or 4 finish in the CAA.
Yep, I'm fearing that as well. And I do think that Braden Young coming in from Loyola Chicago, that might be able to help them out a little bit as well. And you mentioned it. They were able to get past North Carolina A&T, who, they were based around the Walker brothers last season, and they lose both the Walkers from a season ago. So it's going to be a new look team for them. They bring in the Ponce James from Delaware State, and team was relatively good on the glass, had a tough time with regards to perimeter defense, not a team that was really able to bomb it from three. How do you take a look at this team? Because they are going to be bringing back a few guys that were injured from 2 seasons ago, but not a ton of guys coming in aside from Shane Lancaster, who was a solid scorer over at Elkhorn State.
Yeah, again, it's one of those teams that's not really quite finished yet. And A&T has been so in flux for the last couple of years, right? Monty Ross hasn't been able to put the guys that he wants together on a roster for this Aggie team. And for me, I don't really know what A&T is going to look like every single year until it's conference tournament time. It's just been one of those things with injuries, suspensions, guys that you think are going to play a role that don't play a role. Obviously, losing Lurian Walker and Lewis Walker from last year's team is a big problem. Those guys were the engine of that team. But the first couple of games till Lurian got hurt, then it was just Lewis the rest of the year, and he looked really good. It's going to be a completely new look team this year. I think projecting teams that have 10 or 12 new guys is really tough to do, but just based on recent history for the Aggies, it seems like they're going to be near the bottom of that conference. You want to trust in the ability of the program to turn it around, but I think it says something that it's one of the only teams in mid-major college basketball without a steady social media presence. Just a lot of missing things going on with the Aggies in recent times, and I expect it to continue this year.
No doubt about it. And they've had a lot of coaching changes the last few years as well. So that doesn't help with regards to chemistry, as we've got Jacob Phillips. He does an incredible job over at Mid-Major Madness. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, taking a look at the CAA. And this team, I think, is interesting because 2 years ago, Towson was the team that was atop the CAA. They brought back a lot from last season, but they were unable to match those heights of 2 seasons ago. They are going to be returning a few guys from down low, and I think that it was very clear to Pat Scarry that he needed to bring in a little bit of offense. Zion Stanford, if he's able to have a clean bill of health, that'll help. Ben Rosenborough as well from San Jose State. Want to get your thoughts here because with Towson, you know they're going to play slow. You know that they're going to be based around defense, but you just don't know with the offense from year to year.
Yeah, I mean, Towson had one of the most puzzling regular seasons last year of anybody in the conference, probably the most puzzling regular season of anybody in the conference. Just a shock all the way around. You return Dylan Williams and Tyler Tejada, probably the 2 of the 4 or 5 best players in the CAA from 2 seasons ago. You struggle all season, end up as a 7 seed. Then they start really turning it on. They push teams to the late, I forget who it was, to the limit in the conference tournament. I believe it was Hofstra.
Yes.
In the 2-3 game, push them to the limit, lose that game as soon as Tejada and Williams. They lose both those guys this offseason, lose a lot of talent. They bring in some guys that are lesser known. Alex Atkinson from the D2 rank, Zion Stanford, Dennis Battleout, return a couple of guys, but it's not the same roster whatsoever. The issue last year with Towson was the reliance on those 2 stars. They had nothing around those guys. This year, it's more of a deep team. I like some of the guys they brought in, even if they're not superstar transfers. The San Jose State kid, as you were saying, a really good shooter potentially for this Tiger team, but they don't have the star power of the last couple of years. And I don't see Pat Scarry breaking that tournament curse with a bunch of guys that I don't think are going to match up with the top players in this league.
Yep, I agree with you. Certainly Towson is not going to be bottoming out or anything like that, but right there with you. You lose a lot from last season, and last season, in my opinion, just left something to be desired. And for Campbell, it was one and done for John Andrzejczyk as their coach. Now, they bring in a coach I really like, Jimmy Williams. He was great over at Anderson College at the D2 ranks. They won 29 games. They were 1 seed in the Division II NCAA tournament, and that team played some fun basketball. His Anderson team shot about 37.9% for 3, over 83 points per game. Want to get your thoughts here because they bring in some good transfers. Jordan Ross saw some minutes over at Georgia. They bring in multiple guys from Georgia. I can't say the guy's name from Pittsburgh, Nojois Nesteris. We're going to give it our best guess there, but I mean, he was a guy that put in their 9 points per game, and if I'm not mistaken, I saw Quentin Mincy on the roster as well. Guy that missed all of last season, but 2 years ago was really good over at UMass Lowell.
Yeah, I mean, I was stunned when Andrzejczyk left Campbell. Having covered the CAA tournament for the second year in a row, obviously in Washington, D.C., you get a feel for other coaches and what they're like. And not only did John Andrzejczyk seem like the guy for Campbell, he just seemed like a really, really good head coach all the way around. That team was so guard heavy, and they played so well when they really needed to. Dealt with a ton of injuries during the regular season, a ton of adversity, and they got through it. to the point where they were 500 in conference play and posed a real threat. Some of the best teams in the conference, even beating UNC Wilmington down the stretch in the conference tournament. I was stunned when he left. I really did not expect that whatsoever, but they have brought in a number of really good recruits. 3 Anderson guys. I really like the freshman guard, Rashawn Engelman from Anderson, 17 points per game as a freshman. Some other guys coming in, obviously also from those ranks. You got Ben Lee, Sentinel Moore, a couple other guys like that. And then you have the high major transfers, as you mentioned, the kid from Georgia, and then also the redshirt freshman Kareem Ratel from Arkansas, who redshirted last year, but obviously had enough potential to make it at the D1 rank. So it's a better transfer class than you'd expect for a team that lost its first-year head coach. And Jimmy Williams, obviously, a very good track record at Anderson. Excited to see what he can do in the CAA. Campbell's another one of those teams that seems to go through so much turnover every single year where you're not really sure what to expect until you get somewhat into the season. That's definitely the case this year. Double-digit new players, obviously a new coach, guys that have never played together before. Being in Buies Creek, it's kind of off the beaten path a little bit as well. So that adds some intrigue to it, I think. But losing Anderchek and rebounding the way they did, I think is very impressive. I like the Jimmy Williams hire a lot. And I think if the offense clicks, especially with the chemistry coming over from Anderson, they could be a team that poses a real threat to some of the higher powers in the CAA.
Yep, I'm in lockstep with you. I was very surprised that they were able to bring in that good of a transfer class, and I'm liking the Williams hire more and more as I'm looking at it. So we're in agreement there. And then when it comes to this team, I think that they're going to have some of the least talent in the CAA. Unfortunately, that'd be Drexel, but I just bank on Zach Spiker to be able to avoid the total seller of this conference because with Drexel, they'll always rebound, they'll always play defense. A lot of question marks at the guard spot. They bring back Josh Reed, who had about 8 points per game, and they've got a lot of guys that were about 7 feet tall, like Martin De Lapitre. Hopefully I got that correct. And Rolf Atuka.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yep. And they're going to be coming back. So they bring back a little bit of size. Again, the backcourt play is going to be a question mark. Offense, always a problem for Drexel, but I think that they have just enough size to be able to avoid the total seller of this conference.
I think so too. I really liked Martin De La Porterie when he played last year for Drexel. Didn't play a ton for them, but when he was out there, he was pretty dominant at 7'1". They're another team that hasn't really filled out their roster yet, at least from what I can tell. Looks like they have 10 or 11 players on the team right now, at least officially. The most exciting guy they brought over is Panagiotis Pagonis. I think I'm saying that right. Yeah. 6'10" transfer from New Orleans, plays for the Greek national team, at least at the U18 level, has a real scoring acumen inside and out. But they did lose a lot in the way of scoring from last year, and they didn't score a lot already. Obviously, Blakeney going to high major ranks. They had some guys who graduated. They brought in Ladrikis Pittman, who also seems like he could be a scorer from the D2 ranks as well. But you don't know how that's going to translate right away, obviously. And for a team, again, in Drexel that really gummed it up last year, a lot of 55, 54 wins for them, they may get even slower, even more reliant on defense. But again, as you said, when you have Zach Spiker, rarely are you going to see the super highs and the super lows that tend to come along in high major or mid-major college basketball, just because he's such a steady coach and has such a distinct play style that his teams tend to adopt. And I think Drexel should continue that this year. You mentioned the talent thing. Going into last season, I would have told you that Drexel was the 10th best talented team in the CAA a season ago. And you saw where that got them last year. Obviously, a top 5 finish, getting to the Final Four of the conference tournament. So it's hard to rule out Drexel at any time, but I don't see them competing with the tippy top of the conference again in 2026.
I'm right there with you. I don't think that they're going to be a top team, but I just trust in Zach Spiker to be able to avoid the seller. As we are being joined by Jacob Phillips, does great work over at Mid-Major Madness, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this team I think is interesting because Elon was a nice offensive team last year. Boy, did they leave something to be desired on defense. And they're bringing back Bryson Cockley along with Randall Pettis. It's very rare that at the mid-major ranks you bring back 2 double-figure scorers, but they do. One thing that was missing, though, Matthew Van Kamen 2 years ago was such a dominant shot blocker for the team, and you can tell that they really suffered down low. Now they're bringing in a guy in Joshua Dalton, who I think is going to be able to help out along with Hunter Harding, a 7-footer, and he was limited to 13 games. I'm excited for Isaiah Mbank, who comes over from East Carolina as well. Want to get your thoughts, because for Elon, I still have fears about that defense, but bringing back 2 double-figure scorers from last year has me feeling pretty bullish about this team.
Yeah, Billy Taylor, he likes to push the pace. At least he did last year. And you mentioned Van Kamen. That guy was terrifying as a rival fan in the CAA, just towering over everybody, blocking every shot in sight. And then when he left, they switched up how they played, and the defense really suffered for it. Elon was a team that kind of felt a little bit like watching Northeastern last year because they would score a lot of points just by virtue of how many threes they shot, the talented offensive players they had. They get to the rim. Chandler Cuthrell was amazing for them last season. They don't have that this year. They still keep Pettis, they still keep Coakley, and they get some good transfers, including Isaiah Mbang. As you were saying, they brought over a pretty exciting kid from Spain, and Iker Garmendia as well. Jason Petty is a freshman that is getting a lot of buzz in CAA circles. Marcos Serena coming over from the D2, D3 ranks as well, kind of a tall stretch five. They have some pieces here. Again, it's like the CAA, you almost have to look at it as a conference overview because there's the top two teams and there's everybody else. And Elon has the offensive firepower to be near the top of the everybody else portion of the conference. It'll really depend on how a lot of the freshmen and sophomores look, though, because outside of Coakley and Pettis, they're relying on a lot of very, very inexperienced players. There's some guys that really could play like a role. Hunter Harding's one that jumps out for me, 7'1" center coming over from Indiana State. 7'1" in this conference is 7'1". Some of the guys can play, some of them can't, but having that height gives you a shot at getting to a level other teams can't reach. The key, again, is going to be whether they can lock it down on the defensive end. You can score 90 points a game like they did last year, but it doesn't really matter if you can't score or if you can't defend on the other end. Between Harding and Josh Dalton, another transfer big they got over from LMU, the interior defense is going to have to be much, much better than it was a season ago. Bringing back Coakley and Pettis is great. It's less great if they carry over those defensive habits from last year. So we'll see what happens with Elon. I like the roster better than I did last year. They can be 5 points a game better on defense while maintaining some similar offensive efficiency. They'll be a tough team to beat.
Yep, absolutely. If one of those guys like Harding can be a nice low post presence like they had a few seasons ago, I'm feeling good about them. But you mentioned it as well as I did, defense, it's leaving something to be desired. And this is always a team that's going to be very interesting. How about if we take a look at the coach Earl style of William and Mary? They lose pretty much everything from last year. I think pretty much might actually be polite because I think they actually lose everything from last year. But Josh Baldwin is a guy that played over at Cornell, so he knows the coach Earl style. That's going to help them out. I'm excited for Jaden Forsyth. He enters in from West Virginia. Navalin Daniels was actually a really good three-point shooter over at Providence as well. Trevon Blossom game comes over from Idaho. They have some nice pieces. They lack that star player, but with William and Mary, it's more of a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach. And even though there's so much turnover, I just trust in Coach Earl to be able to have his system and, just for lack of a better term, catch teams off guard that just don't see this sort of a style of play very often.
Yeah, I think going into last season, I was on the other side where I was going to believe that Coach Earl's style wasn't going to work until I saw that it would work. Just because I think it's such a hard way to play basketball, the constant pressing and three-point barrage and running up and down the court, hockey-style substitutions, having 13-man depth. I think it's really, really difficult, especially at the mid-major level, right, where it's so hard to build depth without a ton of money. But last year, it worked. It didn't work to the same extent it did 2 seasons ago, but it worked. And he had the identity instilled in every new player that came in. They had guys fill in that looked like they had played for Coach Earl for the last 10 years. Like they didn't miss a beat. And so this year, when they lose, again, pretty much everything, and they have, I think, 13 new commits as of now. I don't think their roster is finalized yet. And some of those guys are exciting as far as what they've done at their prior schools or their pedigree coming in. You mentioned Nillavan Daniels as a big one. They've got a lot of guys with some acumen, and they really prioritize shooting this year. Last year, even though they shot a bunch of threes, they actually didn't shoot them all that well. That was a common theme 2 years ago as well. It looks like some of the guys they brought in are more talented shooters, at least percentage-wise, than maybe they were last year. But then the question is, can they hold up on defense, right? Because William and Mary, it's of equal importance to be an elite offensive player, elite shooter, and elite defender for Brian Earl. And you're going to play 22 minutes a game. You're going to get subbed in hockey style. Can 12 new guys adapt to that right away? Ask me a year ago, I would have told you no. I doubted it last year. I'm not going to doubt it again. William and Mary will be competitive in the CAA and probably near the top of the conference when it's all said and done.
Yep, and they were forcing a lot of turnovers last year as well. That was something that caught me by surprise. And when it comes to this team, they were a pleasant surprise for me last year. I didn't have high expectations for Stony Brook. They were able to exceed mine, and I like the fact that they've got Colin O'Connor in that backcourt after he had 3 assists per game 2 years ago, limited 8 games last year. They bring in Brian Nadanja, who was a double-figure scorer over at Canisius, and F.A. Vatan. He was 6'10", did not see a lot of minutes for Oregon. He comes in. Morris Ugasuk, he's a guy that I really like as well. I look at this Stony Brook team. I might be questioning the depth a little bit, but they've got some top-end talent, and a guy like a Jane Daughtry I think is perfect for this system.
Yeah, I mean, if you exclude the top 2 in the CAA, which again I think you have to do whenever you're considering the conference as a whole, I think Stony Brook has won the offseason so far. Again, that's excluding Wilmington and Charleston because they're in a different class, money wise, pedigree wise, all that stuff. But Stony Brook has brought in a ton of really, really good players. Two former high major guys, Ben Elswick and F.A. Vatan, as you mentioned. And Jonga was just dominant at Canisius last year in a lot of ways. An interior paint presence is something you really must have in the CAA to be competitive. Morris Ugusak, as you mentioned, a really, really good shooter. At his last stop, a guy that could kind of be a flamethrower from the outside. Jaden Daughtry led the A10 in three-point percentage at Richmond. He's coming over this year. And they have a lot of shooting coming back in Colin O'Connor and Ethan Simmons, along with some other guys. Jonah Butler's coming back as well. Guys that all played a role last year. Obviously, Colin O'Connor's season-ending injury. I believe it was an Achilles tear. I'm not 100% sure. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it'll be interesting to see how he looks when he comes back. But at least the experience of O'Connor coming back, a guy who was an all-CAA preseason selection last year. Obviously, a ton of talent there. And then one of the freshmen they brought in, Kalen Dager, is supposed to be really good and a really good shooter. So I love what Stony Brook has done. They've surrounded a couple of the guys who are coming back with a ton of shooting. They have their starting center locked down, a guy who's super successful at a comparable conference in the MAC. They have a couple guys with high major pedigree. So you look at that and you think this is a team that could play 5 out, they could play 4 out, they can attack you in a lot of different ways. Again, it's June, almost July, a lot of time before the season starts. But I think Stony Brook has won the best of the rest offseason in my book so far.
I think they've done a great job as well. As joining me on the show, we've got Jacob Phillips, who does great work over at Mid-Major Madness, joining me for the CAA Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And you mentioned the top 2 schools that have a little bit more money than the rest. Neither of them made the NCAA tournament last year. That was Hofstra. They've been in the top 5 in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage each of the last 2 years. Now they lose Victory down low. That's going to be a little bit rough, but they've got the loyal Chicago connection. Justin Moore and DeWilt Tavares both come in there, and Tavares, if he can get back to where he was over at Florida Gulf Coast a few seasons ago, feel good about them. Quinnipiac transfer Spencer Wee, hopefully I got that correct, 5.2 rebounds per game. Mm-hmm. And then I love the 7-footer down low that comes in from Youngstown State. So I do look at this team in Hofstra, and I don't think that they're going to quite be what they were a season ago, because you lose Cruz Davis, you lose Preston Eadman. That's a little bit rough. But that said, I still think the Hofstra is going to be a team that's going to be more towards that top 3, top 4 of the conference with what they bring in.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not as high on Hofstra as I was on Stony Brook's offseason. They brought in a lot of good players, but I don't necessarily see the scheme fit as quite the same way. And then they lost so much from last season. The identity of last year's team is kind of a never say die, always stay in the fight. The 2-star guards and Davis Nenby, they're not going to have that this year as much. You mentioned the guys from Loyola Chicago, Moore and David Tavares. Tavares is terrifying. He is scary. When he gets the ball in his hands, he is a threat from pretty much anywhere within 35 feet. I think he, coming back to the CAA, obviously the year Charleston went over to Loyola Chicago, really struggled, but that entire team really struggled. Justin Moore also struggling with that team, record-wise at least. But then with the Pride, should be a little bit different story. And then I like what Speedy Claxton has done with the guards. So the question is, can they find a point guard? I was really, really disappointed that Jaden Roberts decided at the transfer portal for the Pride he was going to step in and be a lead guard this year. Had he stayed with Hofstra, showed flashes in a couple of minutes last year. But I like Nick Jefferson coming over from JUCO, a guard that could be molded by Speedy. I think he's going to play a pretty big role. Trey Boyd 3 is going to play an important role for them as well. And then Spencer Wee, again, if we're both pronouncing that wrong, we're both getting it wrong in the same way, is going to be important down low for them. So I think Hofstra, it kind of remains to be seen, right? They don't have the same experience that they did last year. Obviously, losing Ed Mead and Davis was always going to happen after the year they had, but still hurts as well. The only real returner from a season ago is Josh Decady, who played any real minutes. And Decady is a great player, great defender, but not exactly the kind of guy you can build an offense around. Defensive stalwart, but that's kind of where it stops with him. So it'll be about how the guards can fit in. Can they make enough threes? Can they push the pace enough? And can they get back on defense in the same way the last year's team did? I don't know. They lost a lot of identity from a season ago, but I do like what they've done to some degree. I don't think it's quite to the level of what Stony Brook has done in the transfer portal, but I think Hofstra should pose a pretty good threat to their Long Island compatriots.
Yep, I'm in agreement with you there. And then when I look at this team, I think that they're one of the bigger wild cards in this conference, and that would be Monmouth. they were really good in terms of guarding inside, and they didn't make a lot of 2-point shots as well. So they were in the bottom on offense, they were in the top on defense, and they bring back Stepanos Spatilis. He was able to give the team 11 points, 5 rebounds per game. Now, I think you know as well as I do that Jason Rivera Torres was the heart and soul of this team, and he was one of the biggest stat sheet stuffers in mid-major college basketball last year. That's going to be rough. And we mentioned Luron Walker being limited 5 games over at North Carolina A&T last year. He comes to Monmouth in that 5-game sample size, average 16 points per game. Ja'Kai Sanders comes in from Lemoyne. Want to get your thoughts here because for Monmouth, I think they need to be a little bit more efficient with their 2-point shooting just because the 3-point shooting I think is going to be hit or miss. But with Monmouth, they've very much been able to form themselves as a pretty solid team down low.
Yeah, and I think they actually got a couple of guards that I really like in the transfer portal. Ashton Walker coming over from LaSalle and Ja'Kai Sanders coming over from Lemoyne. Walker in particular really was a very good guard for LaSalle last year. Gave them a lot in the way of offense for that team. Obviously, again, another team, you could say that about everyone in the CAA, but they lost a lot, right? Monmouth came within a couple possessions of making the NCAA tournament last year with that identity. Kavion McClain, Jason Rivera Torres, Jack Collins, all those guys who played so well for the Hawks a season ago. None of them are going to be around this year. Obviously, it's going to be a very different team. And this roster isn't finalized either. A lot of guys that will still be coming in. The question more for me is what they're going to do on the wing, losing Collins, who's such an impactful wing defender. They don't have anybody that really jumps into that right away. Justin Ray, who's going to be a really, really good player, also transferred out. Big disappointment for the Hawks. I think I talked to King Rice after they got eliminated from the CAA tournament last season, and he said, listen, if we think you can go to be more successful and make more money somewhere else, you should go. As a coaching staff will tell you to go. And as soon as he said that, I had a feeling Justin Ray was going to go. He left a couple of weeks later, a guy that was super, super important for them. So again, just like the rest of the CAA, there's a ton of transition for Monmouth. My thing is the 3 guys they've gotten in the transfer portal are 3 guys that I think are really good. And the 2 Walkers, Ashton Walker and Lurian Walker, 2 guys that have really performed at the mid-major level in Walker and Sanders. And then Lurian Walker, who showed real flashes in 5 games, obviously, for missing the rest of the season. So the star power in the transfer class has been good. I really question Monmouth's depth as of now. It seems like they're on the right path to building the right kind of roster.
Yep, they do seem that like they are on the right path, and I think this team is as well. Hampton. Now, they really lacked 3-point shooting last season, and they bring in Seth Hubbard, who in the games that he played over at UW Milwaukee, he was banged up, but averaged 16 points per game and shot darn near 36% from 3. That'll help. I love Max Frazier coming in from Central Connecticut. This has been a Hampton team that over the last few years has been sneaky good on the glass. I fear that they might be a little bit of a top-heavy team, but Eaton Strother's coming back is big. Cornelius Robinson comes over from Monmouth. I think there's going to be a lot of people sleeping on Hampton, and I think that this is a team that could be 500, maybe even a little bit better than that in the Coastal Conference this year.
Listen, I was all the way on the Hampton train last year. I think in the season preview I wrote, I had Hampton as the 4th or 5th best team in the conference. Obviously, it didn't come to fruition. They had a ton of talent last year. I remember really liking their transfer class. They brought back a lot of really talented players, Struthers chief among them, even last year. And this year almost kind of mirrors that, right? They brought in a ton of talented players. Adam and G, I think that's how you pronounce it. I could be wrong. Iona, scoring guard who played really well in his freshman year. As you mentioned, Seth Hubbard, Tyler Jackson, who was a former 4-star guy, had a good freshman year at Eastern Kentucky. Max Frazier, the most improved player in the Northeast Conference for Central Connecticut as a big man. And then Cornelius Robinson coming over from CAA foe Monmouth. I like what Hampton's done. It's another team that I after last year where I have these high expectations for them, I need to see them put it all together first. I think Robinson, interestingly enough, is going to be the most important transfer of those guys just because he brings the veteran presence and understanding how to win in the CAA. He's seen it. He's been in the conference for a couple of years. He knows his way around. He's going to provide some veteran leadership, I think, to the young guys. And then I want us those 3 guards, Adam and Jai, Seth Hubbard, and Tyler Jackson, just kind of unleashed alongside ETN Struthers and everybody else in that stable of guards for the Pirates. It's just one of those teams, again, and I don't trust it until I see it because I've gotten burned in the past. So I like what Hampton's done. I really do. It's been a good offseason for them. They brought in a lot of talent. I believe there's probably more to come. A couple decent freshmen coming in as well. But you want to see it on the court before you jump to any assumptions. Last year, I really, really thought it was going to be a good year for them, and then they struggled to score for all 30 games. Hopefully that changes this year for the Pirates, but I really do like what's happened in the first couple months of the offseason.
I do as well, and I got burnt on them a little bit last year as well. So you're in good company, as we do have our good friend Jacob Phillips. He does great work over at Mid Major Madness, and he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how about if we take a look at a team that has a coaching change, but I think that they're going to be right back towards the top of the conference, and that'd be Charleston, because you're bringing Akron coach John Gross. He had an Akron team that was in the top 15 in points per possession the last 2 years. We saw Akron make the NCAA tournament 2 years ago. Last year, they were still a team that won 24 plus games. You're bringing Ben Bradford from Charlotte, Eli Ellis, who is a really good player over at South Carolina, Max Green, a guy that saw minutes at Northwestern, and prior to that was good over at Holy Cross. A little bit sight unseen for Braden Pierce, but true 7-footer that was over at Villanova last year. Martin Kalu is back. I'm really excited about this team, and you know all too well about Xavier Abreu from Northeastern. He was another guy that averaged 12 plus points per game in the conference last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think things had kind of run its course in Charleston with Chris Mack. I wasn't surprised to see him go. I was surprised to see him go in the way that he left, which was kind of
he leaped upward.
And he did. He failed upwards, quite literally. Charleston, before Mack got there under Pat Kelsey, had some really, really good years. Mack got there, and I don't want to say things went south, but they didn't quite live up to the years before. Constantly losing to Wilmington, not quite having the same level of success in a lot of ways that they did under Kelsey. And Mack is a weird guy with the media. It always kind of seems like the sky is falling with him and his team, or at least it did over the last years whenever I got the chance to speak to him. Anyways, I think getting Gross from Akron, Charleston lucked out. It's the best possible scenario that could have happened for them. Mack left, they don't even have to pay him his severance, and they get John Gross from Akron, who's a really, really good coach with a proven track record at the level. I'm a little worried about their roster right now. Again, they're kind of reforming it all over. Eli Ellis, so much high school hype, looked pretty good at South Carolina, but like kind of a guy you want to see it from first. Braden Pierce, again, 7-footer, haven't seen much of him, an exciting talent. Max Green, I really like. Trey Scott from Georgia State, I don't know if you mentioned him, played a lot for them last year, looked really good. And then Xavier Abreu is the other big transfer for them, coming over from Northeastern, where he had a really good scoring year. But for Charleston, I don't know who's going to step up defensively. Ellis and Abreu are both or defensive guards, is putting it nicely. Braden Pierce, I don't know how well he moves. Max Green is a competent defender, but I don't think a guy you'd qualify as a stopper. And they lost a ton of talent from last year. The fact of the matter, Colby Dugan is gone. A bunch of guys gone to graduation. Heartbreaking first round loss to Towson. Not even heartbreaking. They just got curb stomped by Towson in the first game of the CAA tournament a season ago. So you want to see them show it on the court with all these new guys and guys that I really worry about defensively. If there's going to be a star, it's probably going to be Ellis. I do really like him coming over just from South Carolina. A lot of talent, but again, just standing really at 6'0", maybe a generous 6'0". The guy that might get picked on a little bit defensively. When you pair that with Abreu, who's also pretty small and did get picked on defensively, and other guys who aren't necessarily big-time defenders, you start to run into some problems against the best teams in the conference. And then when it gets down to trying to win 3 games in 3 days, which is really what the season's all about for programs like Charleston.
Yep, I am right there with you. I'm excited about Charleston, but I still need to see a little bit more before I can put them above this team. I take a look at things, and I have UNC Wilmington at the top. They were such a good team on the glass last year, and you bring back Patrick Wessler, a true 7-footer that was averaging 9.5 rebounds per game. CJ Luster is a guy that 2 years ago was so good over at Stony Brook, and he was injured last year. Gavin Walsh only played half the year last year, and then you bring in a nice 3-point shooter in Talon Petaway from West Carolina. William Kamori comes over from Northeastern. Jonathan Lamothi, he was able to have an okay role with the team last year, but again, he was limited to 19 games. I look at UNC Wilmington. I know that over there at Mid-Major Madness, if I'm not mistaken, you called them the CAA Avengers because they brought in so many guys from within the conference. They still have a lot of those guys, and they bring back much from a year ago, and I love this UNC Wilmington team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a better program run at the mid-major level on a year-to-year basis over the last couple of seasons than UNC Wilmington. They're so consistently talented in every single way, and then they're so consistent in everything they do. Everything from their social media presence to their game-to-game activity to their fan base to their play on the court to, I mean, everything. The way they talk to the media, you know what I'm trying to say. They're consistent in every single way. That starts the top with Takeo Siddle, who is such a good coach. He signed that extension this offseason. That gives the Seahawks stability going forward. They had a great transfer class. We don't even have to talk about the returners right away. The guys they brought in are great. You mentioned Petway, Tyler Nelson, the guy who was in the Navy. He's coming back for his final year of college basketball after a couple of years away. A big guy, paint presence. Trayvon Maddox from Miami, really good scoring guard. Wilker Mori, obviously from Northeastern, one of the best shooters in the conference a season ago, lit up Charleston, had a great game against Towson, did a lot of really good things for Northeastern. And Xavier Brown, a defensive guard from JMU, who's maybe a little bit less exciting offensively than the other ones, but is still really talented. And then you look at who they brought back, Pat Wessler, probably the best big man in the conference. Jonathan Lamoth is coming back. He was really good a couple of years ago at A&T. Gavin Walsh, who was one of the best rebounders in the country at Binghamton. People forget that between Luster, Lamoth, and Walsh, those guys all missed either most or all of the year last season. CJ Luster, of course, coming back, used that redshirt season. Just an incredible shooter. And then Matija Pradanovic, I think I'm saying that right, and Michael Smith, all giving you that synergy returning for the Seahawks. They're going to have the best shooting in the conference on paper. They're going to have the best defense in the conference on paper, and they'll have the best coach in the conference, at least going into the season. It's going to be really hard to cope with that, and they have a lot of experience to boot. I love Wilmington. I say it every season. I feel like I sing their praises maybe a little bit too much. But when you run a program as well as they run it, it's really hard to argue with what they've done. Again, it's not even July. Not going to predict the conference winner right now. There's no point in doing that until the rosters are finalized, and even then, I'll probably be wrong about it, but if you had to go with somebody right now, it'd be Wilmington, head and shoulders above the rest of the conference.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I'm excited for them. And Jacob, I know you're doing a great job looking at all that's happening in the CAA throughout the offseason. You're going to be taking a look at the conference. You always do a great job with your previews and so much more. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Twitter is a great way to find me. We'll do a lot of stuff here in the offseason. Obviously, big news recently is Fairfield joining up for the 27-28 season.
We can preview them next year. Yeah.
A lot of exciting stuff in the CAA. It's a great conference, always a lot of fun, and looking forward to getting it started in November.
Absolutely. And Jacob, he's doing such a great job looking at this great game of college basketball. First time for him joining the podcast. Was great to get him on, and we'll need to get him on more. Big thanks to Jacob for joining me on Coast to Coast Seats. Now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And up next, I'll give you my projector or finish for the CAA. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is the CAA Conference Preview Edition, and a big thanks to Jacob Phillips for joining me in the last segment. He's a wealth of knowledge over there at Mid-Major Madness. He's holding it down, taking a look at all the mid-major teams out there in the northeast part of the country. First time getting him aboard, and it was a great pleasure. A big thanks to Jacob for joining me in the last segment. And now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for the CAA, and as per usual, since I'm doing a conference preview podcast today, any of the news and notes I might have missed from college basketball towards the beginning part of the week, I will sum those up on the podcast tomorrow, because I do want to give as much sparkle and shine to these conferences and these previews as humanly possible. So that way, if you're listening in very, very late June, July, August, does not matter. You're going to be able to get good information. You're going to be able to get set for what I hope to be the greatest college basketball season ever. And that's a big reason why I leave these as standalone. So how about if we dive in with my projector or finish? And at number 13, I do go with North Carolina A&T. They were actually very solid on the glass last year, 67th in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage, but they lose just about everything from last year. The team gets back two players that missed the entire 2025-26 season, so that should be able to help out. Ifestovis Kazaltulis, hopefully I got that correct, about 4.3 rebounds per game, and then Jalal McKee, he had about 4 points per game 2 seasons ago, but you lose darn near everything from a season ago. You lose the guys like the Walker brothers that were so key for the team. They're banking on Shane Lancaster, who was over at Alcorn State last year, averaging about 11 points, 2.2 assists per game to really elevate this team. The team was rough with their three-point shooting last season, and it looks like they're going to be once again this season, and they just did not guard the arc last year. 336th in the country, with opponents shooting 36.6% from three-point range against them. They get the Ponce James, who's over at Delaware State, averaging about 2 steals, 13.5 points per game, but they lose so much of the ruggedness that they had down low and so much of that size that I think it's going to be too much to overcome. For North Carolina A&T, I've got them number 13 in my projector or finish. At number 12, I'm going to be going with Northeastern. I just really feel like the game has passed by Coach Cohen. His teams were so good a decade ago, and now they were 362nd in opponents' three-point shooting percentage at home last year. In their home games, teams shot 41.4% from three-point range. Again, they lose a ton from a season ago. L.A. Pratt getting down with an injury towards the early part of the season really hurt things, and the good news is Mike Laganane, who he was the main guy that stepped up with the L.A. Pratt injury. He averaged about 10 points, 4 assists per game on 35% three-point shooting. He's back. And then you've got Ryan Williams, who shot 41% from 3, 7 points per game. He's back as well, but I don't have a lot of proven size down low. Team was 297th in terms of rebound percentage last year. Now you've got 6'11" Peter Pinter, who's going to be able to come back after he averaged about 3.5 points per game. And then 6'9" Braden Young. He enters after being on Loyal Chicago's bench last season. They're looking to Lewis Bond to be a little bit of a do-it-all guy. 5 points per game, shot about 36% from three-point range at Idaho State, but they're banking on a lot of inexperience down low. They don't have a lot of size on the roster. I think that they're going to be bullied down low, and when you're getting bullied down low and you're not guarding the three-point arc, that's a recipe for disaster in my opinion. So Northeastern, I've got them at number 12 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 11, I go with Monmouth. Monmouth was actually really good down low. They were a top 85 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, which actually went to 11th in games played away from home. But Jason Rivera-Torres, he was really the heart and soul of this team, a guy that averaged 15 plus points, 7 plus rebounds. He just stuffed the stat sheet. Now they're looking to Stefanos Spatilis, who is averaging about 11 points, 5 rebounds per game to really carry the mail for the team. Ja'Kai Sanders is coming in from Lemoyne after a solid year. 4.5 assists, 10.5 points per game. Will probably run point, shot 36% from 3. And then Ashton Walker was a guy that last season over at LaSalle had about 8 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, and a steal per game. And those are great numbers out there in the A10, but that LaSalle team was all sorts of brutal. Now, I do like the addition of Luron Walker. It was a small sample size, limited to 5 games last season in the conference over at North Carolina A&T, but he was averaging 16.5 points, shot 50% from 3. Again, it was a very small sample size, but should elevate an offense that was 291st in two-point shooting percentage and overall 337th in terms of two-point shooting percentage at home, but just lots of question marks when you lose your main man down low. I think that Monmouth is going to be taking a little bit of a setback with regards to rebounding, and I just don't see a lot of depth on this roster as well. So for Monmouth, I do have them at number 11 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 10, I'm going to be going with Drexel. Drexel might have the least talent of any team in this conference. I'm not going to lie. I have a lot of big-time question marks with them. I just bank on Zach Spiker to be able to help this team avoid the cellar. Last year, it was brutal for them on offense, and typically this is a team that's built on defense. Last year, 290th in the country in terms of points per possession, 320th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Josh Reed is their main guy that comes back, about 8 points, 3.2 rebounds per game. Dylan Tingler, great name, he was able to average about 3.5 points per game, but did shoot about 37.5% from 3, and it was a Drexel team that was in the top 100 with 3-point shooting percentage last year. They do have size. Martin de La Prete, hopefully I got that correct, 3 points and 3 rebounds per game, and actually shot 33% from 3-point. And then you've got another 7'1" big man, Ralph Atuka. He did not see a lot of minutes last year, but now you've got Clem Idowian, who he's going to be coming in after he missed all of last season due to injury. He should be able to give them some size. They've got size. They don't have proven size, but I do think that just having the 7-footers that they've got, I think having a guy like a Reed back in the backcourt, even though it's a little bit of a sight unseen situation, Zach Spiker is going to play that slow controlled style, make things just yucky, grimy, mucky, and I think that that's going to be just enough for Drexel to avoid the cellar. So I've got them at number 10 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 9, I'm going to be going with America's favorite tag team, William & Mary. Now, for William & Mary, Coach Earl is going to be bringing in a guy that he coached over at Cornell a few seasons ago, Josh Baldwin. He averaged about 7.5 points, 4 boards, and 3 assists per game, but they lose pretty much everything from a season ago. And this was a team that really was able to take some strides forward. 43rd in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis generated on defense. They were 22nd in offensive 2-point shooting percentage. Left something to be desired down low. This is never really going to be the biggest team, so they're going to be looking to Jaden Forsyth, who was over on West Virginia's bench last year, 6'5", do-it-all sort of player. And now you do have Nevalin Dennis. He was over at Providence last year. You only average 2 points per game, but the average in terms of his 3-point shooting percentage, it was at 47.6%. 6%. Trevon Blossom game, he was a part of that Idaho team that made the NCAA tournament, and they've got a few nice role pieces, but they're going to need Josh Baldwin to really take some strides forward. They lose so many of those guys that were in this program for multiple years, and I think that that's going to be tough for William & Mary, especially trying to learn such a unique system under Coach Earl. So with William & Mary, I think that they take a step back this year. I've got them at number 9 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 8, I go with Stony Brook. The team was 291st in terms of rebound percentage last season, but that should be able to improve this season. F.A. Vayton, he was over on Oregon's roster last season. He comes in, and now you got Colin O'Connor, who was averaging about 8 points, 3.2 assists per game 2 years ago before being limited to 8 games last season. He should be able to take some strides forward. Jaden Daughtry, he enters from Marist, where he was averaging about 5.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. I like what he's going to be able to bring to the table, and additionally, I think that you're going to be able to get some good production as well out of some of these power conference transfers like Morris Ugasuk. He was averaging about 6 points per game, shot 40.5% from three-point range over at South Carolina 2 years ago, before last year over at West Virginia was just glued to the bench. Leandro Van Eelswyk, he's a guy that is coming in as a little bit of an international man of mystery, obviously inexperienced, but he brings 7'1" size. And Brian Adonja last year, he was over at Canisius, and he was able to give that team about 13.5 points per game. Now, for Canisius, it wasn't necessarily a team that lit the world on fire or anything like that, but I like his overall game. I think that he's going to be able to help out a Stony Brook team that wasn't necessarily the most efficient with their two-point shooting last season, and I do think that this team takes another step forward after last year. It was a good year for them. So with Stony Brook, I've got them at number 8 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 7, I go with Campbell. For Campbell, obviously they lose their coach in John Andrechuk during the offseason, but that said, Jimmy Williams, he takes over the program, and he was coaching things up over at Division II Anderson, where he led the team to 29 wins and a 1 seed in the Division II NCAA tournament last season. And for Williams, his teams were averaging 83.5 points per game. Now, it's a little bit of a sight unseen situation, and how Quentin Mincy is going to be coming off of injury is a question mark. Missed the entire 2025-26 season, but over at UMass Lowell 2 years ago, 17 points, 6 boards, 3 assists per game. That's the sort of guy that could take over a game. They're going to be bringing in a guy in Najoris Idasterius, hopefully I got that correct, from Pittsburgh, and he's not good minutes in the ACC. He averaged 9 points, 3 boards, shot 38.5% from 3-point range. Jake Wilkins, he was over at Georgia last year, where he was averaging about 5 points per game. Jordan Ross is another guy that was over at Georgia, 6.5 points, 2.3 assists per game. Saw some starts. Campbell has some really nice players in the starting 5. I don't know what to expect out of this team moving forward in that very unique style. It's pretty much 100% transfer, so you've got a lot of question marks there, but for Campbell, I think that they're immediately going to be in the middle of the conference with Williams taking over. I've got them number 7 in terms of my projector or finish. And number 6, I go with Towson. Now, for Towson, you do lose these guys like a Tyler Tejada. You lose Dylan Williamson. So their main scorers from a season ago, they're going to be gone. You still have some relatively good rebounding, though, as they're going to be bringing back Caleb Abia, who was able to give you about 5.8 rebounds per game. Jaquan Womack, he was averaging about 7 points, 4 boards per contest. And I like the pickup of Ben Rosenborough. He was over at San Jose State last year, 12 points per game, shot 41.5% from 3-point range, albeit he was limited to 11 games last season. And Denis Badelu, he was able to make 12 starts over at Rutgers last year. Didn't see a ton of playing time, but he should be able to fit this style. And then Chike and Defu, about 3.3 rebounds per game on the bench from this team last season. I think that they take some strides forward. Now, the big question mark is Zion Stanford. He was limited to 10 games last season over at Villanova. He was averaging like 13 points, 4.5 boards, pair of assists per contest over on Temple. Go Owls 2 seasons ago. Should be able to help out a team that they shot just 27.4% from 3-point range at home last season. Overall, nationwide, 349th in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. Towson just always has offensive issues. You know that the defense is going to be there. You know that the slow control style is going to be there. I think that losing so many of those heart and soul scorers are going to be costing them a spot in the top 5 this year, though. So I do have Towson, number 6 in terms of my projector or finish. And Mambo, number 5, I'm going to be going with Hampton. For Hampton, this team has really been building over the last few seasons. They are built down low, and I love the pickup of Seth Hubbard. Seth Hubbard, 16 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, and a steal per contest on 36% 3-point shooting. Now, I recognize they only played like 9 games over at UW Milwaukee last year, but that is such a great place to be able to start with a backcourt that they struggled with regards to their 3-point shooting last year. Last year, this was a team that was outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Really just could not shoot it from 3-point range, but this is going to be a team that's going to be built a little bit more on defense, and having a guy like a Max Frazier, who was over at Central Connecticut, 12.7 boards, is used to a slow and controlled style, 1.5 blocks per contest over at 6'9". That's a nice place to start in. They bring in a guy with familiarity with the conference. Cornelius Robinson, he comes in from Monmouth, where he was averaging about 8 points, 3.9 rebounds per game. Aaron Davis, he was a guy that was over at Bryant, shooting about 36.5% from 3, 9.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per contest. And then Eaton Strothers, he's back after he was able to give the team a steal per game. And Aiden Haskins, keep in mind that this was a guy that was able to shoot about 39.5% from three-point range last season. Tyler Jackson, he comes in from Eastern Kentucky after being a nice player. And I think that this team is really going to be much better in terms of generating steals than they have been in the past as well. So for Hampton, I think that the defense is going to really be able to take a step forward, and I think that they crack the top 5. I've got Hampton at Mambo number 5 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 4, this is going to surprise a lot of people, Elon. The Elon offense was quite solid last year. They were in a lot of aspects a top 100 offensive team in terms of points per possession and in terms of efficiency. They were just brutal on defense. 357th in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, 320th overall in their home games in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you've got chemistry and you've got camaraderie with this team. Bryson Cockley, he's back after averaging 12.5 points, 3.8 rebounds per game, shot 39% from 3. Randall Pettis, 11 points, 3 boards, steal and half per contest. He was able to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point. Now, the depth is going to be a little bit of a question mark with this team, but I think that they've got great size. Keep in mind, 2 years ago, when they had the 7'4" big man in Matthew Van Coleman, they were really able to reach their peak. In my opinion, they're not going to quite have someone that's 7'4" this season, but they do bring in Hunter Harding, who stands 7 feet tall, was limited due to injury last season. Joshua Dalton, he's at 6'10", a guy that was averaging about 3.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game. I think that they take some nice strides forward. And then Isaiah Mbeg, he comes in after he was over at East Carolina last year, averaging about 2.5 assists per game, saw a nice role with that offense. I think that the added size, being able to just impact that defense while having 2 nice go-to scorers, and Cockley along with Pettis back from a season ago, really elevates Elon, and I think that this is a year that they take that stride forward in this conference. I've got Elon, number 4 in my projector or finish. And number 3, I'm going to be going with Hofstra. Now, Hofstra, they were able to represent in the NCAA tournament last year, but when you lose the likes of Cruz Davis, Preston Eadman, it's a little bit hard to be able to rebuild there. Even though Speedy Claxton, he was a guard in the NBA, for goodness sakes. He knows how to be able to coach up defense, but one thing that I think is going to be a constant for this team, the good low post defense. They've actually been a top 5 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage each of the last 2 years, and top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in both years. And now they're looking to the Loyola Chicago connection. Justin Moore, he's going to look to give you more, 11 points, 4 assists per contest, was a little bit due to injury. And DeWitt Tavares, last year it was an underwhelming year for him over at Loyola Chicago. 9 points per game, shot in the low to mid 30s from 3-point range after over at Florida Gulf Coast 2 seasons ago. 13 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists. He was able to shoot 41.5% from 3-point range. I think that he looks a little bit more like that guy this season. Then you bring in someone like a Spence Away. Hopefully you got that correct. 5 rebounds per game over at Quinnipiac at 7 feet tall. And Amon Zugalov. He's a guy that I really think is flying under the radar. Over at Youngstown State, didn't do a lot of scoring, not a lot of rebounding, but 2 blocks per contest with that 7-foot size. And then Carlos Lopez, he was over at St. Francis, Pennsylvania the last few seasons, dealt with injury, but when he was over there during the 2023-24 season, was a 9.5 point per game score. So again, with Hofstra, a big changing of a guard with regards to the backcourt, but I still think that Speedy Claxton is going to have the team towards the top of the conference. I've got them at number 3 in my projector or finish, and I know that they underwent a coaching change, but at number 2, I'm going to be going Charleston. I know that losing Coach Mack is big, but John Gross, he was so good over at Akron. His teams were in the top 15 in terms of points per possession on offense each of the last 2 seasons, and now he brings in a nice go-to scorer in Ben Bradford. He was over at Charlotte in the American Conference last year, 13.5 points, 4 boards, a steal per game. Now, didn't necessarily shoot at the world's greatest from 3-point range. I do, though, think that Max Green is going to take nice strides forward. He was over at Northwestern last year where he averaged about 4.5 points per game. Go back to what he did over at Holy Cross 2 seasons ago, though. He was a nice little bit of a combo piece that was averaging about 5.5 boards, 15 points per game, 3.5 assists, 38% 3-point shooter at 6'8". You're bringing a 7-footer in Braden Pierce, who he was on the bench over at Villanova the last few seasons. If I'm not mistaken, began his career with Kevin Willard as well over at Maryland, but he should be able to give you some nice low post presence. And then you bring back Martin Kalu. He's one of the few returning players from last year's team where he was averaging about 9 points, 4 boards per contest. You got 6'10" Trey Scott, who was averaging about 3.5 rebounds per game as well. And then Xavier Abreu, I think, is a nice X factor. Comes in from Northeastern. He was one of the few guys that didn't get injured for that team. He was averaging about 12.5 points per game. And then Eli Ellis, 2 seasons ago over at South Carolina, was averaging multiple assists, 8.5 points per game. You've got really good depth with Charleston. Charleston really puts a lot into their NIL collective, and I think that John Gross is a coach that has been around the block. We saw what he was able to do in the MAC. I think that he's going to do the exact same thing here in the Coastal Conference. I've got Charleston at number 2 in my projector finish, and just hard to go against these guys. Number 1 in my projector finish, UNC Wilmington. They were such a good defensive team last year. 6th in opponents' three-point shooting percentage, 24th in overall rebound percentage, 56th in points per possession allowed, and you bring back a 7-footer, Patrick Wessler, 13.5 points, 9.5 boards per contest. Gavin Walsh is going to be able to help out down low as well. 6.5 boards, 9.5 points, and had active hands. A steal per game. He was limited to 15 games due to injury, and CJ Luster was a guy that was averaging 17 points and a steal per game on 42% three-point shooting over at Stony Brook 2 seasons ago. He missed pretty much all of last season due to injury. You've got Xavier Brown, who was able to average 10.5 points, a little bit over a steal per contest 2 seasons ago over at James Madison before he was dealing with injury. So health a little bit of a question mark, but you've got 2 guys that could be alpha dog guards in this backcourt. That's big because they do lose a lot of that backcourt from the season ago, but they always love to bring in guys from within the conference. William Kamori, he was over at Northeastern, 13 points, 2.5 assists per game, shot 42% from 3 points. Jonathan Lamothi, 14.7 boards, 2.5 assists, steal and a half per contest over at North Carolina A&T 2 seasons ago. Limited role last year, but was able to shoot 40% from 3. And then if you need more 3-point shooting, Talon Petaway, 39.5% 3-point shooter with 8.5 points per game over at Western Carolina. This team has depth. They've got, in my opinion, the best big man in the conference in Wessler. Wilmington always rock solid under Takeo Siddle on the defensive side of things. I think that they've done a nice job to even enhance that offense even more. I've got UNC Wilmington as my number 1 team on my projector finish for the Coastal Conference, and that'll wrap things up for the CAA Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family of Podcast. A big thanks to our guy out there with Mid-Major Madness, doing a great job holding it down in the northeast part of the country, Jacob Phillips, who joined me in segment number 2. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have 1 or 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast. Here in the off season, we're taking a look at the news and notes of college basketball, and you're getting a specialized conference preview podcast for all 32 conferences. We're up to 6 down, so we've got 26 left. I'll be doing one every about 4 or 5 days. So expect like 1.5 per week, as I like to say, and it's all in an effort to make this the best college basketball season ever when the games return. Picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.